I thought, well, I will definitely feel better in the arms of this tree. And shortly after that, I heard a loud crack.
Challenges. There's no denying we all have them. These are the stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and emerging better on the other side. I'm Cheryl Hunter. As a teenager, I was kidnapped and held captive. Today, my mission is to let you know that you are bigger than anything that can ever come your way. Join us for these extraordinary stories and be reminded that your true nature is to rise. What would happen if you lost that which was most important to you? The answer might surprise you, and I'm going to let Lyena Strelkoff tell you why. What was life like before it changed?
On the surface, I think I looked pretty successful. I was in a new relationship. I had co-founded an award-winning theater company in Los Angeles. But the truth of the matter was I wasn't really available for my own life. I had a lot of dreams and aspirations that were sort of littering the ground around me because I couldn't really go forward. I couldn't take advantage of any of those things.
What do you mean that you couldn't take advantage of those things?
I just didn't know how to make anything happen. I sustained a lot of trauma as a child. And so by the time I was 8 years old, I was absolutely determined to keep bad things from happening to me. And my way of doing that was to micromanage everything in my life, to not take a single step until I knew every possible outcome and I could somehow position myself correctly so that I went right where I wanted to go and there were no detours and no surprises and certainly nothing coming out of left field. And it's very hard to actually live from that perspective.
I'd heard you say that you weren't available to your own life. What was that costing you?
Well, the biggest thing that it cost me was a relationship. I had been very much in love with a man that I spent almost 18 years with, off and on. And it didn't work out in large part because I couldn't show up. I was constantly trying to make it a safer environment for myself. That's the most poignant example.
And say something about this theater and dance company.
I'd been a dancer my whole life. Started doing theater when I was, I don't know, maybe 13. Some good friends of mine decided that they wanted to start a resident theater ensemble. And we wanted to do original plays in a very spectacular style. And so we did.
And how long had you been a dancer?
My whole life. I didn't actually start taking classes until I was about 12, but by then I was already a choreographer. This was my greatest love, was to be in my body and express myself creatively in my body.
And then something happened that changed the trajectory of your life forever. Tell us about this.
I woke up in the bed of a friend whom I'd recently started dating, and he treated me to what I was certain was the best orgasm of my entire life. But instead of that making me feel relaxed or exhilarated, it made me really nervous. But it was okay because we had a plan to go and do one of my other favorite activities. My whole life I've been an avid outdoors woman. Hiker, climber, trail runner. And by the time I was 7, I was carrying my own little backpack and sleeping out under the stars in the backcountry wilderness without a tent. So we drove up the coast and we went for a long hike. And on that hike, I saw this magnificent tree. Now, the truth is, by that point, my anxiety had become really intense. I had spent the whole drive up there and the whole hike silently obsessing about this new relationship. And this was such a familiar and agonizing mental exercise. I had been doing that my whole life. So when I saw the tree, I thought, well, I will definitely feel better in the arms of this tree. Dean and we both started climbing. And shortly after that, I heard a loud crack. And one of the branches broke, and I fell backward about 25 feet. And when I hit the ground, the impact shattered my spine, crushed my spinal cord like a banana, and left me instantly and completely paralyzed from the waist down.
What was your first thought when it hit you that this was the situation?
The fall itself, the time that I spent in the air, which for me was a very long time, was pure bliss. It was the most profound spiritual experience I had ever had in my life, and it was nothing short of glorious. So it was an absolute shock to me when the planet jumped its orbit and rushed up to meet me in the air. And I was getting messages. I was getting told what I needed to do. My initial feeling was, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to be the one who has some kind of miraculous recovery, and I'm going to regain the function and the feeling in my body.
Are you willing to share some of the message that you got when you were in the fall?
Before we went on that hike, I had been praying for help, for a way to let go of everything that I was holding, of everything that I was trying to control and fix. And I'd actually been in a car accident 5 days before. And when that happened, I felt like God was trying to talk to me, but I couldn't understand what the message was. And so I said out loud, "Thank you, I hear you, please try again, because I don't understand." So when I heard the crack, and I reached in front of me, and there was nothing I could grab, there was nothing I could do, and I knew for absolute certain that I was going to go down, for the first time in my life, I let go. I just surrendered. And I was washed with this incredible peace. And I had time to notice everything. You know, like the trees and the branches and the leaves and the shape of my own body in space. And how peaceful I felt, and how I had never in my life felt that way, and how I never wanted to feel anything else but that. And then I heard this voice in my head that said, everything you need to know is happening right now.
You've been able, it seems, to carry those messages forth into your life. How have you managed to do that?
I didn't initially. I decided that I was going to be the miracle case. And I decided that the way to do that was to believe in it with every cell in my body. So I gave myself the directive. I had to think the right thoughts and feel the right feelings and banish all self-doubt. And I had to do it perfectly.
They say the hallmark of someone who has really transcended an event is that they now use it to contribute to other people. And when I hear your stories, you seem to do that with every breath. Say something about that, would you?
About how I use it?
Yes, the way you give away what your lessons, you've turned your challenge into this gift that you give to people.
When I got out of the hospital, I had some things to say. And because theater is what I knew, I took those things to the theater. Then I ended up writing a one-woman show, autobiographical show about the fall and everything that I was learning. A show called Caterpillar Soup. And for 5 years, I offered that show. And I would go into communities and lead workshops and essentially facilitate these communal healings. In my experience, it was within the first year that I was injured. I was sitting at the table with my mother, and I was marveling to my mother how a person can thrive after such a devastating loss. And my mother, who is a concentration camp survivor, looked at me and said, "Yes, but how?" And I was really moved by that question, and I didn't know the how. I sat down and I started to deconstruct everything I had done. What were the steps I had taken? What was the perspective? What were the intentions? What were the actions? What were the beliefs? Until I could eventually codify the whole process into something that I now call the Cheryl's way. And I lead retreats and workshops, and I coach privately, and helping them really make their lives their own.
Has your experience connected you with your mother in a new way?
My mother was devastated when I was injured. And I got out of the hospital and I started, sharing these stories, and there was magic happening in my life. And it seemed like my mother couldn't see any of that. And it was painful for me and confusing. One day, I finally managed to transfer from the couch back to my chair independently. And it just so happened, as I was in the middle of it, she walked into the room, and I couldn't see her when she first walked in. And I did the transfer, and my butt landed in the chair, and I sat up, and I had this beaming, triumphant face. And my mother looked horror-stricken. And my first thought was, oh my God, somebody died. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, things are just so hard for you. And I wanted to kill her. I was like, do you not see how extraordinary my life is becoming? And I finally asked her about it. And she said to me, it's not that I don't see. It's that there is nothing that is ever going to make this situation right for my baby. And I realized that my mother had a right to her own experience, and it was going to be different from mine. So it's changed a lot of things between us in a really great way.
What would you say to people who are in the grips of some challenge that they think is bigger than them, that they think has beaten them or may?
Generally, when something really bad happens, we recognize two options: beat it or be beaten by it. And that was where I started. I was going to beat this thing. But what I realized in entering into an authentic relationship with the experience of paralysis, we couldn't be adversaries anymore. I didn't have to love it. I could still hate it. I could still be hurt by it. But I had to make space for all the things that were true, because there was all this beauty going on too. And I entered into this relationship and it became a dance. And I discovered this vast and rich space in between beat it or be beaten by it. And the question became, what do you have for me? What gift, what wisdom, what insight? And who am I willing to become? And that changed everything. From there, now I was in a position of power. I was still paralyzed. I'm exactly as paralyzed today, but I am empowered in a way that I never was before I was injured. And I have a sense of purpose, and living into that purpose, that's what brings out our magnificence. And I believe with every cell in my body that that magnificence is present in every human. We chronically underestimate ourselves. I did. I mean, if you had asked me before I fell if I could survive being paralyzed, I'm a lifelong dancer. I would have assured you that it would kill me, and I would have been wrong. So the fact is, if we can find the right support, and we can allow ourselves to have enough of it, to ask for it, to make it a priority, to seek it, to accept it, we can step into that magnificence. And when we do, this extraordinary thing happens. Because when I stand in my power, there's this light that comes out of me, and it's simultaneously universal and unique. And when that light is shining, suddenly you see yourself differently, and your light starts to shine. And we all rise. And when that happens, everything I've been through and everything I've lost becomes just a little bit worth it.
Thank you for your heart and for sharing it with us.
It's my pleasure.
Lyena shows us that resilience is truly possible no matter what we face. I'll see you next time.